Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Mel Vandevort, and today I have a special guest host with me. I have Paya Sample, and Paya and I talked a whole lot about leadership mindset. We dug into things like, what does your leadership look like? Know who you are, know what your values are, know your why, all of the things that lead into a good leadership mindset, and how you can leverage your superpowers and leverage the superpowers of others where you're lacking some superpowers. Paya is the visionary founder and owner of Pedagogy in Action with an impressive 17 years of experience as a principal, elementary educator, and instructional coordinator. She has honed her expertise to transform education into an inspiring journey for students and educators alike. Paya's educational journey has been rich and diverse, fueling her passion for empowering minds. Armed with a bachelor in sociology and anthropology, a master's in elementary education, and an educational specialist degree in educational leadership, she stands as a shining example of continuous learning and growth. From bustling public schools to nurturing private instructions, Paya has thrived in diverse educational environments. She's been instrumental in shaping high-performing schools and districts, as well as championing change in districts where students are still striving to reach grade-level standards. Throughout her remarkable career, Paya has worn many hats. She has fearlessly developed cutting-edge curriculum, championed equitable practices for every student, spearheaded technology initiatives, and led transformative action research cohorts. Her dedication to nurturing educators shines through as she coaches school leaders and delves into research to unearth the very best practices in leadership and teaching. Paya plays a lead role, igniting a spark in educators and paving the path for a brighter future in education. When she's not making changes in the educational landscape, you can find Paya emptying the dishwasher, listening to podcasts, folding laundry that never gets put away, initiating dance parties with her children, electric slide anyone, going for a walk or trot, and searching for her coffee that she set down somewhere. It was a wonderful conversation with Paya, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hi, friend. Are you ready to move into a leadership position? Do you have interests and ambitions that you want to pursue, but feel like you don't know how to take that next step? Maybe you want to start your own coaching or consulting agency. I'm Mel, and I help educators define their career path through correct mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for your career transition. I will show you how to level up your leadership skills, share your expertise in a new way, create impact on a larger scale, and put your leadership in motion. As an educator for over 20 years, I started to feel underused and like I had more to give. I knew when the time had come for me to leave the classroom and affect change on a larger level. Now, I'm ready to help you determine where your talents and skills mesh with your passions and interests. Put your leadership in motion and move into that next phase of your educational career journey. Let me help you define your career path by having the right mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for that next leadership position. So power up and put your leadership in motion. Welcome to the show, Paya.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. So my name is Paya Sample. I am a leadership coach and thought partner to school leaders, mostly here in the St. Louis area. And I am the founder of Pedagogy in Action, where our purpose is to create joyful and inclusive learning environments that uphold a culture of human dignity for each member of the school community. So I'm looking forward to digging into some conversation this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you. Paya and I met very recently. We both did a wellness summit, and she was a speaker and I was a speaker. And so we kind of connected there and realized we were both educators. And so it just made sense for her to be on my show and talk about what she's doing now and all of the great things she's doing as an educational leader. So Paya, why don't you just take the lead and give us some more information? Tell us about your journey. Let's talk about educational leadership today.
Now, that sounds fantastic. So this is my 18th year in the world, I say, of education. And so prior to my role now as a leadership coach, I served as the principal of a school here in the St. Louis area 4 years prior to what I'm doing now. And before that, I was an instructional coach and I was an elementary school teacher. So I taught first, second, third, and fourth grade. I was the teacher that quickly said, yeah, I'll try that grade level, or yeah, I'll go to that school. And I loved every piece of it because I had an opportunity to really kind of grow and stretch myself in ways that I don't think was possible had I stayed in the specific role that I was in. So let me tell you just a little bit about the timeline of what some of that looked like, because I think that's an important piece of my journey. And so I was a classroom teacher for several years before stepping into the instructional coordinator position. And that is when I kind of really understood and really started to see that I could see myself in a more leadership administrative position. And so I went back to school to work on my ed specialist degree during that time, received that, and was kind of thought, all right, I'm ready. I think I'm ready to go back ready to kind of apply for a more like leadership title. However, as I was getting ready to do that, I found myself kind of pausing, a little bit apprehensive. And I kind of took some time to explore what that was about. And I had this fear of being in a leadership position and losing touch with what was going to happen what was happening in the classroom.
Yes.
Up until that point, most of the leaders that I worked under, I kind of saw them as the leaders that lived in their office. I would see them every now and then. Maybe they would be in my classroom once, if I was lucky, maybe twice a year. And that seemed to be the norm. I did have one leader that really kind of shook the mode for me. She was in the classroom more, had a lot of conversations with me about my instruction. And I wanted to be more like that, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so I was a little bit reluctant again to move into a principal or assistant principal position. And so rather than simply going into it, I said, you know what, I'm going to give myself some time. And I went back into the classroom. And at the time, I was, again, a little bit reluctant to do that as well, but I feel like that was the best move that set me up for the best success for stepping into a leadership position. So I took that time. I kind of went in with a really intentional mindset of what kind of leader do I want to be? And if, getting clarity on who I am, the type of leader that I want to be. And as a classroom teacher, I was more aware of what my principal was doing at the time, what I felt like would have been helpful as a classroom teacher to have had in a leader. And so kind of really shifted my mindset and perspective, which I really think helped me to move from a classroom position into a principal position. So I made a pretty big jump. And I truly think I was successful in that jump, but a lot of it was because of the mindset work and some of the internal work that I did prior to that position.
Yeah. So there's a lot that you've already said, and there's some things that I want to follow up with. So you talked about growing in the different roles that you had.
Yes.
And I think that's important that we realize that every role we have is a learning opportunity, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in leadership, whatever that is. Even as a parent, we learn different aspects of education and what that looks like and how that can help us. It's tools in our toolbox. So what I want to follow up with that more on is that even if it's a role that wasn't great and you feel like you didn't learn a lot in that role for your own growth, you still learned what ineffective leadership looks like, or ineffective teaching, because I see that now more because I had a role recently that absolutely gave me more tools than I had ever gotten in all of the years previous as a leader, because it helped me grow my skills. And I wish that I had been taught some of those things as a teacher.
Right.
And being able to go back and learn those things at that time and then go into what I'm doing now absolutely set me up for success and gave me more skills than I ever would have even imagined I needed nor were possible.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when we go into something expecting, right, we set expectations of what we think this teaching position, this leadership position, regardless, we go in with certain expectations, and I think it's natural for when we start to see that those expectations aren't being met, that we want to kind of quickly like, I want to get out of here. I'm done. This is not what I thought it was going to be. But I would encourage any listeners and anyone that's considering just any type of again leadership title
Uh-huh.
and that they're going to go into, um take a moment when you start to realize my expectations aren't being met. Take a moment to think, but what am I learning? What am I
Yes.
being exposed to? What am I, you name like ineffective leadership. I would even push and say it's a different type of leadership. And
Yes.
so when you're under someone where they're not leading in the way that you find to be the most effective, it might not be effective to you, but be curious, lean into that and ask questions. Who is responding to this type of leadership? Who are the people that this leader is able to motivate with that leadership style? And then how can I grasp those components, right? And maybe try some of those pieces on in a way that might, fit for me. And so I can look back as well and think about times and seasons of my life where, again, it wasn't to me, it was just it wasn't matching my expectations. But
Yes.
I learned so much. It was hard, it was challenging. I may have learned how to have difficult conversations. That's not something anyone really actually teaches you how to do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something you only get better at the more experience you have, right? And
Right.
so I would just encourage anyone that's, thinking about any kind of change, whether again it's a title, whether it's position, whether it's just moving from one grade level to the next, take time to remember and look back on what did you learn? What skills did you gain in that position? And how can you, utilize those skills moving forward?
Yeah. And you said something else, it is a different type of leadership. And you're right. It may not be ineffective. And some of my principals in the past, they were the same. I would see them a couple of times a year. I would see them throughout, the year as well in different areas and things like that. But as far as instructional growth, they weren't real great at helping me be a better teacher. They were
Mhm.
great at being a principal and taking care of the big picture stuff. But as far as instruction, I didn't learn a lot. But I
Mhm.
didn't really realize that until
Mhm.
after I was out of that position and into a different position in the leadership role. So really it's important to like audit what's going on in your own arena
Mhm.
and determine whether you're getting what you need, like you said. And
Mhm.
if you're not, if you truly aren't getting the growth that you need, how can you get that growth if you're still, I mean, you may only be a couple of months into the school year and you've got a lot of time left
Mhm.
before May or June, whenever your school is out, and you've got some growing to do. So lean into learning and figure out how best to grow your own skills, even if you're not getting what you need from your principal. And maybe your principal doesn't even realize that they're not as effective as they could be. So
Right.
push back a little
Yeah.
bit and advocate for yourself.
Yes. I want to follow up on another thing you said is like one of the things that I quickly learned, as a teacher, like I'm, watching my leaders, watching principals and noticing the absence or noticing that they are present. And I create stories, right? We create these stories in our mind as to why they're not present, why they are present, like all these pieces, right? And one of the things I've learned and grown, I would even say like widened my aperture around is understanding all the components that principals specifically are navigating, are handling, all these plates
Mm-hmm.
that we have to spin. And, it was a quick rude awakening for me when I went into the principal role, realizing, whoa, like there's so much more to it than I realized. But one of the things that helped me is I knew I wanted to be a leader that was present. Right. And so I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be in the classrooms, in the hallways. I wanted students to know my name. I wanted to know the name of each of my students. I wanted to know the strengths and the areas of growth for each of my staff members as well. And so
Yes.
if this is like this is the leader I'm going to be, right? If I know that's the case, that's who I desire to be, yet I still have all of these other things that are going to be pulling for my time and pulling for my attention, then I had to make a decision of how am I going to protect time to get into those classrooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that became, when I looked at my calendar every week, I prioritized getting into the classroom. So I blocked off time on my calendar and made it non-negotiable. I made it this is not going to be something that I'm going to give up to attend this meeting or give up to work on this project, but I had to put it on my calendar and stay true to that's important to me. And so therefore I'm not willing to sacrifice that component. And it's not something I did right away. It took, a few months for me to kind of develop, okay, how am I going to make this work? But I was able to then prioritize my time with what was important to me, what was important to the way that I wanted to show up in this role and in this space as a principal. And so that's another piece I would say, we have to know who we are.
Yes.
We have to know our purpose. We have to know what's driving us in the positions and in the roles that we have, and getting clear on that, because that should dictate how we spend our time. That should dictate when I'm in a meeting talking about curriculum or trying to develop curriculum. Yes, I'm doing that work, but I'm also making sure it's tied to, okay, I know I've been in classrooms. How am I using what I've seen in classrooms, what I know about my teachers, to help me make a better decision around curriculum? So I think just kind of really knowing ourselves and what's important to us is a really good indicator of can indicate how we use our time and what we prioritize.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. And as a principal, you are the instructional leader in your building. So you need to be in classrooms and you need to know what's going on, because you cannot guide instruction and have strong tier 1 instruction in your building if you are not in the classroom seeing what's going on. So, right. Yeah.
And it allows you to make better decisions as a leader.
Yes, right? It does.
You start to see this connection between we made this decision. What's the trickle down effect, right? So if we made this decision around a curriculum, we made this decision around a new dismissal procedure, we made this decision around a new schedule for lunch and recess. Sometimes these decisions are made in, these meeting spaces or in this conference space. But in order to see how it's truly affecting the culture and climate of your school, you got to be in the places to kind of see how does it impact, all the different workings of the school.
Yeah, absolutely. You cannot put in a new system or initiative or something like that and not be there to see how it's working. So absolutely. So you had said you wanted to stay in touch with the classroom. And so give our leaders, our teachers who are wanting to move into a leadership position, give them some ideas about how to make that happen. How can you know what's going on? We talked about being in those spaces, and you talked about putting it on your calendar, but can you dig into that just a little bit more?
Yeah. So, I did a couple of things with, getting into classrooms, and I would even say it was yes, getting into classrooms, but it's staying connected and knowing my teachers. Right. And so, the first thing I did as a new principal moving into a space is I, sent out an invite to every member on my staff and asked them can we get together, and if you want to do coffee, we can do that. We can meet in my office. And it was truly a space to just hey, tell you a little bit about who I am as a leader. But I really want to get to know you. Why did you say yes to the job that you're in? What is something that's really important for me to know about you? What does support look like for you? Right. And then I can't remember exactly how I asked it, but essentially I asked that question is, what is something that I need to have on my radar as I am coming into this new school and coming into this new space? And what that allowed, for one, it allowed voice, right? It allowed the teachers to share their heart, what's on their mind. That last question, especially, oftentimes it was the things that were bothering them.
Yes.
Right. It gave them space to name it, but I didn't have to say, oh, great, I'm going to do something with it. It just gave me a space to say, okay, thanks so much for sharing. I'm going to think about this, and kind of using those pieces in some way. So connecting with the teachers, I even learned teachers who went by nicknames or shortened names. What do you want me to call you? Making sure I can pronounce names.
Exactly. And I did that same thing when I moved into my first principal position. I sent out a survey with all of those questions, but then I sent that out meeting, and then I met with every either teacher group or individual teacher.
Yeah.
So like the second group cohort, I met with them, but then I met with individual teachers as well. So
Yeah.
I did that exact same thing, and it really sets you up for success on your first principalship, because you get to know your people and you build those relationships. Because I went 2.5 hours away from home, so I didn't know anybody that I was working with. I completely had to immerse myself in who they were and what they found important. And I even asked those questions like, what would you change if you could? And got some great feedback on that. So
yeah. Yes, I think it gives you a ton of great information. And so that's one thing that I would say, starting off with just getting to know your staff. As I said before, getting in the classrooms, I use walkthroughs. A great book that's out there, I think it's called The Power of Walkthroughs. Justin Bader used his work to kind of create this time and these spaces in my calendar to get into those classroom spaces, and then simply being present, right? And so knowing what's happening in the classrooms, it means I got to know the kids, and I have to know students, not just in the classroom spaces. So I was at recess, I was at lunch. I'd go into their specials classrooms to start to understand the dynamics of students in the different spaces throughout our school. So I would say those are some key things that I did, but I didn't just let it be at the start of the year. So I tried to create touch points with the teachers throughout the course of the school year, going into their classrooms for meetings instead of always having the meetings in my office, right? And so if we have a meeting, like just go in and let's meet in your classroom space. So I'm paying attention to what's on the walls. It's just giving me more of an opportunity to learn each of my staff members individually, and getting to know the people behind the positions and titles that they carry. I think that's the biggest thing I would say, is like learning them and knowing them. What's their purpose? What's driving them? And what does support look like is a key question, because my definition of support looks one way, right? But that doesn't mean it fits the mode for every single one of my teachers. And so I think that's the key component as well. And so those are some pieces. And then one other thing I'll name is having some type of leadership team or some type of committee or some way for you to be able to kind of keep pulse on what are some things that are happening in the school. And so, yes, you can do that through your individual conversations as well, but really bringing a group of staff members together to bounce ideas off of that you might be considering, to say, hey, we made this decision, go back to those folks that you represent and ask them, how is this impacting them? What does this look like? So just a rhythm to be able to keep, again, I keep saying, check the pulse of things, but also it gives you a space to start to build capacity of other leaders that you see in your school and kind of growing them and those skills as well.
Exactly. And one thing I want to follow up with that, when you are putting together your leadership team, when you go into a principal position, you don't know things. And so I inherited my leadership team, and yes, many of them were great. Some of them probably didn't need to be on my leadership team because their mindset was not where it needed to be as a leader. And so do not be afraid to disinherit your leadership team if you're going into a position, and restructure your entire leadership team if you need to, as you are doing having those conversations and getting to know your teachers. You're going to pick up very quickly on who has that growth mindset and who needs to be on your leadership team. And so restructure your leadership team. Don't be afraid to do that before you start the school year, because you want everything to be set up for success. And if you're inheriting people who really do not need to be your eyes and ears because their mindset is not where it needs to be, then restructure that team.
Yeah. And I would to add on to that, there might, and this was for my leadership team, there may need to be a space to talk about what does it mean to be a leader.
Yes.
Right? And so I think that first year we spent a lot of time just, for one, learning, like, what do I need to know as a leader, all these pieces. But then we really did some like leadership development. And I realized quickly, and I still see this today with a lot of the leaders that I coach, it is some mindset work, because people often equate leaders to positions. Right? And so really trying to redefine that leadership is not about the position or the title, that you hold, like I truly believe it's about the position of your heart, right? It's a
Yes.
position of, do you see that there's potential in the people around you?
Mm-hmm.
See that there's potential in the processes and systems around you? And are you courageous and brave enough to pour into and develop those people, processes, and systems? And
Yes.
so we had to do a lot of work around that. And I was really pleased. And it was actually one of the spaces I really enjoyed being, because I got to see teachers shift in their perspectives of who they are and what they brought to the table. I think many times in education and with teachers specifically, we're humble, right? We're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I think I'm okay with this. I think I'm good at that. And it's like, no, like we all each have skills and strengths and abilities that we bring to the table. And like, we don't want to minimize that work. And I found that
Yes.
many of my members of my leadership team were doing that. And it's like, no, we need that skill. We need that. And this is what you bring
Yes.
to the team. That is a strength. Not everyone sees the world in that way. And that's like an amazing thing that we need to have. And so with that leadership team, I think there needs to be some work around, why are we here? Why do we exist? What do we mean when we say leader? What do we mean when we say a leadership team? Again, just really working to grow the capacity of those teachers and seeing themselves as leaders. And as I said, I don't think it's just teachers that need this work. I think people who are in position
Absolutely.
titles need some of that work as well. And so that's what
Yep.
a lot of the work that I get to do is really to try and cultivate and develop leaders so that they can lead these effective organizations, so people can show up as their authentic selves, and so they can show up as their authentic selves as a leader and find their shoes. So I like to say, when you find your shoes and you're walking your path, it feels great. And so like that's the work that I get to do, and helping teachers, like helping leaders, like find your shoes, be confident in who you are and what you bring to the table, and carve your own leadership path instead of trying to be on the path of someone else or wearing someone else's shoes.
Yes, exactly. And I was actually going to say that exact same thing to follow up after you were saying everything about your leadership team and what that looks like as being a leader. I have really grown more just the last few months digging into leadership on my own and being self-reflective and learning what my leadership style is and where I need growth and where I'm very strong. So even recognizing your own skills and what you are really strong at and where you need that support, and then find those people to put on your
Yeah.
leadership team. Where
Yeah.
you lack in one area, you're going to be able to find somebody who
You
can
have to
support
find,
you,
yes,
because yes, you need to be very supportive. You are the leader of your building, but you also need support as the leader of your building.
yes. I would always say, like, I hire people that are smarter than me.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
I
Me
make
too.
sure the people around me are brilliant and genius individuals that do things that I can't do. And that's
Yep.
what makes our team better. That's what makes our school better. And so we need to, I would say, bust this misconception that leaders have to know it all. No, you don't. You need to know yourself, know
Mm-hmm.
what you bring to the table, know what you lack,
Exactly.
and hire smart people. That's what I was
Exactly.
like. Fill your team with people that are brilliant in the areas that they are brilliant at. Like for me, like reading, I loved reading at the level of like, teaching and instruction. I'm sorry, reading instruction around comprehension and having conversations. But when it came down to like the science of reading and decoding, that was not
Mm-hmm.
my jam. But I knew
Yes.
whose jam it was. So I went to that
Yep.
person to help me make those decisions. The same as early childhood. Early childhood like gave me like hives when I first started as a principal. I never didn't understand it, right? And so I immersed myself. I made sure every single week I was in those classrooms. But those teachers were the ones that I went to when we had to make decisions or really had to think about the best direction to go. I tapped into their expertise to help me with those decisions. So I think it's, yes, definitely necessary to know who you are, what you bring to the table, and kind of how to surround yourself with other folks in that way.
Yes. And don't think that you are an ineffective leader just because you have areas of growth. Everybody has areas of growth all of their life. There are things that I can't do as well as other things. And, I'm a music person and I understand music pretty well, but do I know everything? Absolutely not. So what do I need to do? I need to immerse myself in places where I can learn to be a better musician and learn everything about being on a praise team and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to seek out the people who can help me grow in that area. And as a leader, that's exactly what you need to do too. So let's dig a little bit more into mindset. Keep going with that. You had a message about mindset today, and let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think mindset for anyone that sees themselves as a leader is the most important, I would say the most important tool, strategy, skill that we need to develop. Um, I I had to take some time, and I keep talking about busting this misconception around what a leader is. I had to really dig into my like head and heart around like when I keep saying this word leader, who is popping up? And for me, it wasn't someone that looked like me. As a Black woman, I had one Black principal in my career. Everyone else was white woman or, yeah, it was just white woman. So I realized as I was talking about leaders, I kept kind of having this picture around a white woman, right? And
Yes.
I found myself like really trying to figure out like, I found myself trying to shed pieces of my identity to try and fit this position of white woman leadership. And it wasn't working because that's not me. Right. And
Exactly.
so when we talk about mindset work, I had to kind of grow in my understanding and being comfortable with not looking and fitting the same package as other leaders that I kind of had I've worked under. And so a lot of it was like growing my idea of what a leader is. So I started thinking about the leaders that I was following, books that I was reading, who was I surrounding myself with, and really kind of defining my own, creating my own definition of what leadership looked like and being comfortable that it looked like me.
Yes.
Looked like me, not just like physically, but also like I'm an emotional person, right? I didn't have leaders that often were emotional. And so I was trying to like shed that piece of me. And it's like, no, this is who I am. And how do I bring that? That's a gift, actually. That's a strength that I can actually bring to the table, that I can connect with individuals in ways that maybe other leaders weren't able to. And so this mindset was around a lot of the mindset work I had to do was, okay, defining what was there, what was kind of this fixed mindset I had around leaders, and how do I get comfortable with who I am and what I bring to the table. And much of that work was getting comfortable with who I am. Who am I? Who are you? How do you show up in these spaces? How do you want to show up in these spaces? What are the strengths that I bring to the table? Like a lot, much time I saw the things that I was doing. It's just like, I think this is normal. I think everyone does it this way. And I quickly realized they didn't. So I talked to people and said, like, what are the things that I do that you don't think anyone else does? So having these open, vulnerable conversations with loved ones or colleagues that I trusted, and let them kind of pour into me and speak truth into me around, no, the way you look at this issue, people don't do that. Like a lot of people I'm around don't look at it in this way. That's a gift. Right. Yeah. And so really kind of rediscovering or discovering, kind of depending on where you are in this path.
Right.
Who I am, but allowing people to kind of help speak into that. Again, people that I trust, people that I know. So that was a lot of the work that I was doing, was just getting comfortable. And then with who I am, but then finding a school or finding a community where you feel like you can show up as your authentic self. Are there places and spaces that you can show up as who you are fully and wholly? I think that takes a lot more work because you got to, there's a lot of research around finding the school, finding the space. But yeah, I would say a lot of it was kind of getting comfortable with who I am, getting clear on my purpose, getting clear on my why, allowing loved ones to pour into building me up and helping me to see my strengths for what they are and not minimizing them, not saying that it's just, this is the way that everyone else sees the world.
Yes. And it's funny when you were talking about, you being a Black woman in a leadership position but you had this mental model of someone different. And my boyfriend and we were going somewhere last night and he was talking about an AI workshop that he had done yesterday. And he was talking about how even in AI, there's mental models of what people in certain positions look like. And I've noticed that even on Canva, when I'm going into Canva and I'm creating graphics and things like that, if I put in a certain term like principal, a lot of times it will give me a picture of a man in a suit or standing in front of a school or something. And if you want something specific, you have to actually put other identifiers or clarifiers in there to get what you're looking for. So even AI has
Yeah, I
models,
mean,
mental models that are not exactly
right.
representative of
It is,
what,
yes,
yeah.
it's everywhere. It's the way we've been socialized to believe and the way we've
Mm-hmm.
been socialized and conditioned to see. When we say leader, you type leader in Google, you're going to get a pretty clear, probably white
Yep.
male in that piece, right?
Yes.
And so I think it kind of, there's this TED talk that is the danger of a single story. And I've used it a lot. I've, kind of go back to it, but I think that's what we get into.
Mm-hmm.
There is danger around the one story we tell around individuals. I mean, this can go in so many different directions, and I'm not sure if we have time to go into all that, but it can
Right.
go in
Right.
so many different directions. But there is a danger of a single story with race, gender,
Mm-hmm.
um, religion. I mean, all these different pieces. But I also think there's a danger that we tell around leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
we look at the number of folks who are in leadership positions. It rings true. It's still kind of tied to that. It's still the white male typically in these leadership roles, and so there sometimes can be a danger. Oftentimes, unfortunately, can be a danger with that piece. And so I think women, Black women specifically, I'll talk
Mm-hmm.
to, who are thinking about moving into a leadership position, just giving yourself space to kind of wrestle with um, those stories and kind of surrounding yourself, because there are Black women out there who are in leadership position and out there killing it. And so how
Yes.
do you kind of create and kind of bust that misconception, bust that single story that the world has been telling us, and realize you fit. You fit
Exactly.
just as you are. You bring things to the table that no one else can bring.
Exactly.
And so I think there's a lot more that we have to kind of fight against, but it's worth it. It's necessary, um, essentially for our students, right? So for the students that we get to serve, to see, for me, and I can think of a number of stories for students of color, Black, Hispanic,
Mm-hmm.
Asian, also for white students, to see Black men and women in leadership can really push against that dangerous narrative that the world is often telling them.
Yes.
And so I've had many conversations with parents of the school that I was a principal at. It was just, we're so thankful that their children got to see a Black woman in a leadership position,
Mm-hmm.
big chunk of their elementary or early childhood.
Yes.
There's power in that as well.
Exactly. And exactly. So we're running short on time. So let's kind of get to the end here. I would love for you to give us one last piece of advice around mindset, or whatever it is that you want to give us for teachers who are ready to move into that leadership position.
I think my last piece of advice is know yourself. Know yourself, know your worth, know your values. Get clear on that, and don't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Once you are clear about who you are, why you're doing what you're called to do, your purpose and your mission, and you feel comfortable in the shoes that you are walking in, don't waver.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a space, there is a place for you where you can comfortably walk in those shoes and experience
Mm-hmm.
the joy that comes in it. So I would say take the time
Exactly.
to get clear about who you are, what you do, what you value, and don't waver from that.
Exactly. Wonderful. And that is some great last words to close up with. Paya, how can my audience connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn as Paya Sample. I think I am in a blue blazer on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, and it's at pedagogy underscore N, the letter N underscore action. And you can also head over to my website, which is www.pedagogyinaction.com. And there's, ways to contact me there. But I appreciate having the time to chat with you today.
Well, thank you so much. And listeners, you know that I will have all of Paya's contact information in the show notes for you, so you won't have any trouble at all connecting with her. Paya, thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation. It was amazing. Listeners, have a great rest of the day and have a wonderful weekend. And I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.